good afternoon on what is a slightly chilly but definitely overcast afternoon. It is Monday, the 16th of August. I am back in the Read Nook with a handful of parcels and, of course, a nice little cup of tea. And the next thing I am going to unbox is this, which has, let's have a look, it's come from Trinity Knot Studio, so let's find out what's in here. Okay, that's come nicely open, and then I have this is the Desert Moon of Karth. For use with the Mothership Sci-Fi Horror RPG. It's by Joel Hines, and was funded via Kickstarter as part of Zine Quest 3. Now, Mothership is a role-playing game which it's a horror role-playing game in the vein of Alien, Aliens, and Outland. So its genre is science fiction, but in particular its genre is blue-collar science fiction. So this is space as somewhere where you work. So you wear overalls, you're likely to have oil on your uniform, or basically your coveralls. The computers and the equipment on your ship is going to be bulky and built to the lowest basically price available, and built to last rather to be gleaming white. So this is, and essentially this fits into that genre. It's a percentile system. It has a really kind of neat way of creating characters on the character sheet, where you basically follow tracks on it depending upon the tracks being different for each of the various roles you can take, which are sort of essentially scientist, robot or android, marine, or pilot, or labourer, I believe, as well. But this is basically set on a planet called Karth, or moon called Karth, in the desert. And I open up, and essentially here's the setting. I give you straight off the page, straight on the first two pages, you have the complete setting. This is where you will be adventuring. So, welcome to Karth. Karth is a tiny meso-studded moon on the galaxy's far edge, a desolate and strange place filled with volatile factions, dangers and riches. Survival or salvation is optional, partner. This module doesn't provide every detail, but instead a solid framework for gaming. Without blank spots on the map, there could be no monsters scribbled in the periphery. With the player's interaction, the moon's tense situation still likely falls into chaos, but differently than described in what happens if the players do nothing. This is Mothership being part of the old school Renaissance, or at least essentially being adjacent to it, inspired by it, because it's not strictly obviously it's not D&D, but it has its own Appendix N. Basically, the Appendix N being the essentially the list of inspirations for Dungeons and Dragons, which was found at the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So the Appendix N for the Desert Moon of Karth, and this will give you sort of like, here's what the type of game it's going to be, is Dune, Firefly, John Carter of Mars, The Dark Tower, Cowboy Bebop, spaghetti westerns, and sandbox adventures like Hot Springs Islands, Ultraviolet Grasslands, Pound of Flesh, and Slumbering Ursine Dunes, many of which I have reviewed and enjoyed. So, Desert Moon of Karth is tiny, it's abnormally dense with standard Earth gravity. Once every 2 weeks it stays night for a whole week, then the orbited blue gas giant Tabernasus eclipses the moon, so that's when it's eclipsed, and so on. Relic orbital satellites shoot down all ships or flying objects. Karth is on the edge of known space. Ossified coral alien chunks are worth loads of credits. Factions want different things. And so you've got some idea of, there's a good overview on the next page. You've got advice on how to use it, so working it to an ongoing campaign, starting a new campaign. So it's got the use Why Am I Here table on page 8. Oh, that's fantastic. Running a one-shot, or content and resources to steal, and it references the various tables and sections which the game master could plunder for her own game. So we basically go on for, so essentially, basically that's the overview. We go into the timeline, and a discussion of the different factions, because factional play is always great. It's one of the things, because it always sets up tensions and leads to conflict, and then conflict resolution. Ultimately, however violent or non-violent that resolution is. And the thing is, one of the things it does address is what happens if the players do nothing? Because essentially, not all. Some players don't want to get involved in your story. Some players decide they want to do something else. But the factions are not just going to sit there and do nothing. They're going to carry on. They've got their own agents and workers and so on. So you have a guide to what happens if the players do nothing, which is great because that's great. That's great because essentially it's a guide to here are the events that are going on around you whilst you're doing nothing. And so Desert Moon of Karth is a desert point crawl travel. So if you have a look at this, what's interesting essentially in a sandbox adventure, it's consisted of all hexes. So the player characters are free to move from one hex to the next, travelling and hunting and looking around them, perhaps encountering a monster or discovering a feature or the entrance to a dungeon or something. And they're free to wander where they will, based upon their own knowledge, their curiosity, and rumours that they come across during the course of their travels. Now, a point crawl instead is really a case of here are the points that are of interest, here are the routes between them. So the player characters don't have to wander all over the place going, basically they want to get to point G, but they don't want to all over the place going to point B, then E, then back to C again before they get to G. They can take a more direct route, whether that's through other locations. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll go back to that map, and here is a point crawl, and you are, from a starting point, you can go from there to there. Essentially, it's like a hex crawl, but you've got dedicated routes that will basically, or features that will lead from one to the other. So, although travel is important, it kind of it streamlines it. So if the player characters have not been to here before, you've got a guide to arrival, and then you arrive in Larston, town of Larston. So that's fully detailed, and you've got first impressions. I think I'm impressed by the wealth of detail that's gone to this. There's so much here. So this is all really enjoyable. There's so much to really dig into, and there's so much flavour that I can see just from 1D places in town, barracks and arsenal, governor's mansion, bronze statue of Lars Tanaka. Who's Lars Tanaka? Well, go up and have a look. Random encounters out in the town, NPC generators, lots of tables to generate elements that the game master can bring into her campaign, or spur her to create something else, or a story or adventure. The actual major NPCs are all detailed, and then we get out into various locations and further out into the wilds away from Larston, including because it's a science fiction moon, then of course there's bound to be a mine. So you've got overall, what does the mine interest look like, and you've got a complete map of the mine, and of course there'll be reasons why the player characters might want to visit the mine. You've got a ruined spire to explore, and again does the same thing. Here's an overview, here's a really nicely done view of what's inside, and basically there are more NPCs at the spire, and then we go out further out, and to essentially where's this, the ship graveyard. Oh, I mean, you know, what's a science fiction moon without a ship graveyard? I mean, it's a cliche, but it's fun. You know, why is it a ship's graveyard? What's stopping ships getting off the planet, off the moon? What's the owner of the graveyard doing with them, and so on. And it keeps. And we have an old rejuvenation centre, which is basically a ruined, essentially, science fiction spa or equivalent of. Before we get into the quarry and bounty generator, so essentially there's outlaws, which obviously the player characters could track down if they wanted to, and I probably will during the playthrough of this the adventure guideline for duels, because of course this is a space western. And we have a map of a sand squid interior, because it's a desert moon. You need sand, not worms, but sand squids for the player characters to basically find themselves swallowed by. And then lastly, 100 old tech devices which they can find in the course of their adventure. And then finally, I'd say finally, because, you know, on the back I searched the body table. This is jam-packed with playable content. You can have a mini campaign, sort of like generated procedurally as you go, playing this. You create the NPCs, the player characters interact with them, they go on adventure, they come back, they interact with some more, and so on. Really, there is some preparation to required with this, but there's so much here that will help the GM prepare and run her game. This is fantastic, and if you do go find a copy, I'm thoroughly impressed with this just on a first browse through. I've got to dig into Mothership some more. I've reviewed the core book and I've not done anything since, but I should, because it's a fantastic little game that is really popular with the old school Renaissance crowd, or essentially the writers and players that are sort of like adjacent to it as well. So yes, that is Desert Moon of Karth from Trinity, not Studio. Thoroughly recommend that to add to your Mothership game, to do something different with it, because obviously Mothership game is generally a horror game and it's focused on particular locations that you're exploring and finding something going on and then running away because there's a horror there. But this is different and designed for longer term play and exploring of the moon, and you can play desperate characters trying to make a living and get by. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook, please hit the like button down below. If you've got any comments or feedback, please do post those. I do take the time to read them and respond. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me with some parcels and a book or a game, which I will talk about as best I can for about 10 minutes, accompanied of course by a nice hot cup of tea, please hit that subscribe button. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.